Hello friends, I hinted at this video before, but we're properly here this time. Welcome to a fun little side video I just wanted to make. In the meantime, between the actual big videos and all the reviews and that sort of stuff, just something I wanted to discuss, just right off the bat essentially, similar to my regular Talks About videos. Because I found something very interesting. See, when I was doing stuff related to the 10-year project, I happened to do that on a site called Royal Road. Now, that place has a whole bunch of stories uploaded to it, all that sort of stuff. Real nice. But I haven't checked out many series. However, whilst I was uploading things for the 10-year project, something caught my eye after I opened up a link to one of the series. And that happened to be this right here, ADT, or A Demon's Tale. Now, you might be sitting there and thinking, well, yeah, what is this series? You know, you're bringing up this random series you found online, all this sort of shit. I mean, you expect us to know what this is or what it's like, all that. And I mean, the obvious thing is, I'll now explain what it is. I mean that's the whole point of me being here. Is, you know, I kind of talk about it and then you listen and you go, oh, you know, that sort of thing. But anyways, let me talk about it a little. So, A Demon's Tale, or ADT, is written very similar to ReZero. Now, I don't mean in terms of plot. There are some similar beats here and there, maybe, but overall, it's similar in terms of how it's written. This very script-like structure on how it's written. You know, you see the characters' names, you see them speaking, you see a lot of dialogue boxes kind of separated from the text, that sort of thing. Very similar to that, but actual plot-wise, it's decently different, and honestly, very interesting. The series actually starts off with something interesting. It kind of talks a lot about essentially the future and being able to see it or know it or whatever it may be, right? Which you don't really see too much of in regards to what that leads to until later. But a lot of this stuff is really interesting because it kind of just, you know, leads you on a little bit. It's like a rope in front of you, and now you're getting pulled into it because it's like, oh, you know, it's talking about the future, but then you see things and you're not sure if it's the future that they're talking about, but then you get later into the story and it's like, oh wait, maybe this will come up later, and then some of it does, and it's like, oh shit, right? Works out really well in that regard. But more importantly, the actual plot of it. The two worlds, Earth and this place called Varantora, essentially combine together, right? At some point, sometime way back when, these two worlds kind of combine together and create this brand new world that's massive in terms of size and everything. They allude a little bit to a third world, but it's honestly unconfirmed right now if there is a third one or anything. It's an interesting theory that's in the series, but they don't really go into it too much, at least not at the moment. Now, regardless of that, this big world now has, you know, humans, flowers, all this sort of stuff, but then also beast people, you know, kitsunes, demons, dragons, but like the dragons similar to stuff like, you know, Madeline, for example, from ReZero, you know, that sort of thing, right? That sort of stuff in there, which is really damn interesting. And now the story kind of revolves around this supposed danger that's in there, right? Like, these people, after this whole thing combined, even though there wasn't really much conflict between, you know, the people of Earth and the people of Varantora, it kind of mentions this alluding sort of like, oh, there's something greater here, you know, that they just don't know about and all this sort of shit, which is really interesting. There are some things I can think of in the series that would be related to this, but I'm not really sure, you know, if I can pinpoint it exactly right now. However, I can trust that the author will definitely go into this later, because I think this especially is a really interesting aspect of the story, and so far the track record for going into stuff later is pretty good. Anyways, let's start talking about the actual, essentially, beginning of the series. So, when we start off the series, we were met with two characters, Shiro Fuloreen and Ishin Fuloreen. Ishin happens to be a essentially retired hero, and Shiro is somebody who has Divine Ki, which essentially lets you become a goddess or a god should you pass a whole bunch of trials. But overall, other than that, she's just a regular sort of teenage succubus girl. That's it. Right. And the big drive here is Irie wants her daughter to go to this school in relation to these trials and everything, but isn't forcing it. You know, if she doesn't like it, she doesn't really want to go, whatever it may be, she's willing to, you know, let her stay back and figure out whatever she wants to do with her life, right? Whereas Shiro, a little bit nervous about all that. You know, she wants to do her best, but it's a little unsure of the, like, what to do, right? You know, she doesn't know if it'll work out. She doesn't know if she'll make any friends, all this sort of shit. It's actually a lot of real problems in there for her, which I like. There's a lot of moments for Shiro in particular that really give this sense of, like, wow, some of this stings hard, because there's some actually, like the friend stuff I mentioned, right? I don't know that I've personally been in that sort of scenario, because I mean, not to like, oh, be like, oh, I've made so many friends and all this sort of shit, but it is a thing of like, you know, I can't necessarily say I've been super nervous about the idea of, you know, making tons of friends or some sort of shit like that. But it is a worry that you can see and be like, ah, yeah, you know, I do feel kind of bad for her in that regard. It's something real, right? And there's a lot of stuff later, I just don't want to spoil it, but there is stuff way later in the series that's really good in that regard. But another thing regarding Shiro's character is, at the end of the first chapter, she has these visions. Like, there's something so real that she can't really call it just a dream or something. It feels like a vision, right? It's a vision coming to her while she sleeps, or whatever it may be. And the interesting thing with this dream is we don't know too much in regards to it. All we know is this person that she sees, you know, gender ambiguous, all this sort of stuff, like build ambiguous, everything. The only thing we know is that they have red hair and red eyes, right? Matching colors, red like blood, all that sort of shit. That's specifically how they word it, red like blood. And this gets brought up a lot, right? This is one of the sort of things I mentioned regarding the future that gets brought up a lot in the series. And it's one of the interesting aspects, is finding out more about this. And sometimes there's changes with this in terms of what she hears, or in terms of what she's seeing, you know, whatever it may be. That's really damn interesting in that regard. Now, I only really want to talk about the first chapter in that regard, because I mean, I think it's fair to give an introduction, but I don't obviously want to say the whole entire series and just kind of ruin it for everybody, because now you know everything. But this is really damn good, right? The characters in this series are very enjoyable. I think early on, they're decent, essentially, but they have some, like, flaws here and there in terms of just writing and all that, right? They're not necessarily perfect in that regard, but they still are very enjoyable early on. However, I think it's the later arcs, like Arc 3 and onward, that they are really damn good. A lot of them especially. My personal favorite characters, so far at least, are Kokatsu, this kitsune country sort of woman who acts very brash and acts very, you know, joking, all this sort of shit, you know, having fun at others' dismay, but not dismay in like a terrible way, like causing them misery. But it's a thing of, like, you know, being an annoyance to, like, that sort of thing. She's great in that regard, but she also has her own real moments. Like, she actually has some of the best heartfelt sort of moments, and like a lot of sad moments, all that sort of shit. She's really good in that regard. Similarly, another favorite character, Yoro. Yoro's really damn, like, great as a character in that regard. But more so, like, if anything, I would say, like, Kokatsu is the funny but also still heartfelt one. Yoro also has funny moments, but feels like the more, like, the character who has a lot stronger heartfelt moments. It kind of depends on what you're, like, looking for as well, because I do think Kokatsu does have some really damn strong heartfelt moments. But that sort of shit. Anyways, there are a ton of characters that are very enjoyable here. You got Sylvia, who's this, like, snake woman. She's all purple and everything, and it's weird with the way her dialogue and character is written. You're never sure what you're supposed to expect from this character. You can't tell if she's good or evil or whatever it may be, you know, that sort of thing. It's very interesting with her character. You got Kaoru, which is this, like, little kitsune girl. She's a lot, like, in a way she works perfectly with Kokatsu. I think that's what works really well with her, is she works perfectly with Kokatsu, where Kokatsu is this brash, you know, older one who says a lot of shit, does a lot of shit, all this, acts kind of reckless, right? Where Kaoru is the, you know, polite, tidy sort of character who knows what to say, knows what to do, all that. Not necessarily, like, perfect by any means, but she is the one who is essentially getting stuff done, right? She gets stuff done, and then Kokatsu's kind of like the physical person, right? Like the actual really strong one, all this sort of shit. There's a lot of really good characters. Honestly, one of the most interesting ones in terms of depth is Nero. I'm not going to say too much about him, right? I think it would be very spoiler heavy to say a lot about him. But his backstory stuff is tragic, honestly, but also kind of heartfelt. Some of the stuff that happens with him in general is really tragic, and when you get to a certain point, ooh, his character is really great at that certain point. But I don't want to say too much about that. I will say, I do think the series really picks up, like, more around the second arc, right? I think the first arc, good introduction, gets you used to the characters, gets you used to what's going on. Cool. Second arc gets a lot better, right? Characters feel more fleshed out, there's a lot more interesting stuff happening, all this sort of shit. And then I think arc 3 and onward, everything after that is where the series really picks up. Like arc 5, you know, most recent thing that was uploaded, all that, oh, phenomenal. Like, actually phenomenal. The work in arc 5 with the characters and stuff like that. Another one of my favorite characters, Devi. Ooh, her character in that arc is so damn good. She gets a lot of good chapters there, and they're long. I love just going, like, I occasionally, just for fun, just go through them again, right? Just to see certain moments. I like to scroll down. I've done that with other series as well, right? I've done that with Fist of Star, ReZero, Bleach. Sometimes I'll just go into a chapter, you know, find the spot that I remember being, like, really damn strong, and I just read through it again. Did that with some of Devi's chapters in Arc 5, and oh, it's actually phenomenal. I love this character. But yeah, there's a massive cast of characters here, and we're not even done, right? We don't know what the next arc will have in store and all this sort of shit. There could be more we get introduced to, all this sort of shit, right? There could be more that's fleshed out. You know, it's kind of crazy. There's a decent amount of characters who at least get a good bit of screen time to at least have you say, yeah, you know what, I enjoy them. I enjoy when they get a scene. You know, it's really damn great. And the world itself of this place is really interesting. So far, the series hasn't really delved too much into, you know, what's going on with it and, like, a lot of the locations in it, because the implication is that this is way larger than Earth or Lorantora, you know, that whole thing, right? It's larger than both of those. But we don't really see too much as of yet, right? That said, we could see more of these locations should there be way more to this series, right? We might see what it's like for some of the other locations and stuff like that. A lot of it kind of revolves around the, like, essentially demon country sort of place, but there are occasional trips to other places. That said, not very many, but I am very curious because there is the implication that there is a lot more, right? So far in the series, I think they've shown, like, maybe 4 country sort of locations, right? Like, it's the general, like, oh yeah, here's, like, you know, this province sort of area to it, and then here's this one, and, you know, that essentially is all it is. It doesn't show you the full scale of the area, but you do have the general thing of, like, okay, so there's this place of Mazokuni, there's Itazura, there's, you know, Zero, which is, like, the capital of the world, you know, this sort of place, and then there's this, like, the dragon sort of stuff I mentioned. There's a place involving them, and we don't see too much of there, but we see, like, these slums that are kind of nearby. So there's that, right? I'm very curious about the dragon place. I hope they do actually explore that more, but we'll see with the future, right? That said, I do think the locations in this series are very interesting in terms of how they're described, because it's very similar to other series where it's like, even though these two worlds have merged, right? So cultures have merged, all this sort of shit, right? The people have, like, come together. There's, like, hybrids of all sorts, you know, that sort of thing. Thing is, a lot of these locations kind of take from both, like, fantasy and then also real world sort of things, right? Some of it has, like, oh, very, like, the Mazokuni type of place, right? Specifically the Babylon district is very, you know, general, like, kind of this Japanese, like, oh, here's like the sliding doors, you know, proper, like, wooden sort of homes, that sort of thing, right? Very simple in look, right? And that's something they describe it as. It's a very simple location. It's peaceful, it's nice, you know, all that sort of shit. But there are elements to it that give it a little bit more of a fantasy feel, and the same thing with a lot of other locations, right? I really like it in that regard. Now, because this isn't some, you know, insanely popular sort of series and all that sort of shit, there isn't much to actually speak about. It's not like I can sit here and be like, and the OSTs and all this sort of shit, like the get-intos and all that, right? Obvious sort of thing. But something I will note with the series is the fact that there are some really great illustrations in here, right? It's rare. It's kind of rare that they happen, but on occasion, at least once an arc so far, right? Except for the 2 early arcs. I think the 2 early arcs didn't have any illustrations, but arcs 3, 4, and 5 have all had illustrations so far. There's also this, which is the cover, right? I'm pretty sure, just based on art style, I'm pretty sure this was done by somebody else. There is actually an editor who is doing art for the series occasionally, like they do sketches and stuff like that. So I think some of this, or rather this in general, is them, right? Just looks similar in terms of style. And then the actual illustrations are the author themselves, Aka Oni. So, you know, kind of neat to see 2 different art styles there for the series. But speaking of the illustrations, right? Those illustrations look really damn good. Like, you can see improvement as it goes on and on. Like, as we go from arc 3 to arc 4 to arc 5, you can kind of see the improvement there with the art style and different creative decisions to make the pieces a lot more interesting. Are they necessarily perfect? No, but they do look really damn nice, and it has me excited for the future of the series, because honestly, later down the line, some of these will probably look really damn insane. Like, some of these, you know, you'll probably sit there and go, holy shit, just seeing, you know. So it's pretty damn exciting to see just what it is right now and what it might be in the future, right? With that said, that's all I really wanted to say about the series. It's kind of a brief video, but I felt like, you know, mentioning it, talking about it, all that sort of shit, giving it a shout out was kind of worth it, because it's a fun read. Honestly, like I said, early bits of it, kind of more simple, but it's a fun read. Currently, there are 104 chapters out, and I think the total is something like 117, 118, something like that. Somewhere around there. I don't know. But that's overall, you know, ADT, A Demon's Tale. I think you should definitely check it out. Go give Aka One maybe a follow on Twitter, all that sort of shit, since the chapters seem to get posted there. So, good idea to do that. Like I said, if you're interested, be sure to check the series out. Give Aka One a follow, or maybe just, you know, follow the series in general. Either or, that works, right? With that said, that's the end of this video. It's time for me to get back to work on the Infinite Wealth stuff and all that sort of shit. And I do want to possibly make a piece for the ReZero volume, like I mentioned, though I might make one for the next, I don't know, right? We'll see about that. With that said, though, and I've said with that said twice, huh? Well, anyways, take care. Have yourselves a great night. Be sure to be on the lookout for 10-year project hints, peeps, because I'm going to be starting those up again very soon. You will probably see them as soon as this video goes up, right? But yeah, overall, take care, have yourselves a great day, and that'll be it for this video. Bye, peeps.